Hey everyone, and welcome! Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive periods in American history, the massive push west that happened between 1800 and 1860. This was a time of incredible growth, wild innovation, and, yeah, some really intense conflict.
But what was really the engine behind this relentless drive to expand? Was it all about the money? The hunt for land, for profit, for new markets? Or was something else going on? Was it driven by these big ideas about American destiny, democracy, and what the nation was supposed to be? That's the big question we're going to tackle.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer speed we're talking about, get this. In the decade right after the War of 1812, the number of American settlers living west of the Appalachian Mountains literally doubled. This wasn't some slow, steady migration. It was like a dam breaking. So what on earth was pulling all these people west?
All right, let's start with the first big piece of the puzzle, money. You really can't understand the move west without following the powerful economic currents that were totally reshaping the country at the time.
You've got to understand, this was all happening during what historians call the market revolution. Basically, the old way of life where a family grew pretty much everything they needed was ending. All of a sudden, new roads and canals meant a farmer in Ohio could sell his crops in New York City. We're talking about the birth of a true national economy, and with it came this massive hunger for new land, new resources, and new customers.
And this wasn't just happening by accident. There was a plan, a master plan of sorts, championed by the politician Henry Clay. He called it the American System. Step 1, protect the new factories in the North with tariffs. Step 2, create a national bank to keep the money stable. And Step 3, the real kicker, use federal cash to build the roads and canals that would connect the whole country. It was a complete economic blueprint for growth.
And wow, this vision was supercharged by some game-changing new tech. Eli Whitney's cotton gin turned the South into a cotton-producing giant, which created this insatiable demand for more and more land. Then you had John Deere's steel plow, which could finally break through that tough prairie soil in the West. And of course, steamboats and then railroads. They were like the new arteries of America, pumping goods back and forth and making the whole venture profitable.
And just look at this chart. It really shows you where the money was going. The investment in canals in the Northeast and the West was absolutely massive. Projects like the famous Erie Canal were total game changers. They slashed shipping costs and travel time. So you can see this powerful economic engine, built out of steel, steam, and millions of dollars, which is pulling people westward.
Okay, so the economic case is pretty strong, right? But it wasn't just about dollars and cents, not even close. Let's flip the coin and look at the powerful ideas, the beliefs that were used to justify this whole westward push. For a lot of people, this wasn't just a business venture, it was a mission.
And this idea really goes way back to Thomas Jefferson. He had this deep ideological vision for what America should be. He believed a true republic, a healthy one, was built on the backs of independent, landowning farmers. To him, that was the moral core of the nation. And for that vision to work, America needed one thing above all else: land. Tons and tons of it.
And this idea, it fit hand in glove with the rise of Jacksonian democracy. The West became this powerful symbol of the common man. It was seen as the ultimate land of opportunity, a place free from the stuffy old elites back east, a place where any white man could vote and could make something of himself based on pure grit. That frontier myth was an incredibly powerful political tool.
But, and this is a huge but, this ideological dream had a really dark, brutal side. To make room for this new American common man, the people who were already living there had to be moved. President Andrew Jackson, who is seen as a hero to those frontier settlers, pushed the Indian Removal Act through Congress, and he framed it as a humane solution, a way to protect Native Americans from the conflicts of white society.
And this is where you really see that disconnect between what was said and what was done. As the historian Anthony Wallace points out, Jackson talked a good game about friendship and concern, but the policy itself was ruthless. It was designed to let states basically seize sovereign native lands, all for the benefit of white settlers and land speculators.
The human cost of this ideology is just staggering. This number, 4,000, is the estimated number of Cherokee people who died during the forced removal from their homes in Georgia. Out of 15,000 who started that brutal march, known as the Trail of Tears, 4,000 didn't survive. It was the horrific price paid for an expanding republic whose ideals of liberty only applied to some.
So we've got profit on one side, principle on the other. So which was it? Well,
The real story is that you can't really pull them apart. Let's look at how these two forces were almost always tangled up, each one feeding the other.
So let's take a look at our first case study, the Louisiana Purchase. And it all kicks off with a massive economic emergency. In 1802, Spain, which controlled the port of New Orleans, suddenly cut off American farmers from using it. This was a disaster. It was their only way to get their goods to market. Their entire livelihood was at risk, and they were screaming for the government to do something.
So Jefferson sends his guys over to France, which now owned the territory, hoping to just buy the city of New Orleans. But Napoleon, who's busy with wars in Europe and needs cash, throws this unbelievable offer on the table: the entire Louisiana territory for just $15 million. It was one of the greatest real estate deals in history, and it was born directly out of that economic desperation out on the frontier.
And here it is. This is the perfect moment where profit and principle collide. Buying all that land was actually a huge constitutional headache for Jefferson. He believed in a small, limited government. But as historian Joseph Ellis puts it, Jefferson put those principles aside because he had this powerful ideological belief that the West was America's future. The immediate economic need fit perfectly with his long-term dream for an agrarian nation.
All right, now for case study number 2, the Missouri Compromise. And this is where things get really heated. When Missouri wanted to become a state, it set off a national crisis. Why? Because it forced a head-on collision between the economic and ideological reasons for expansion. Southerners said their whole cotton economy, which was incredibly profitable and depended on enslaved labor, had to expand west. But Northerners pushed back, arguing on moral and political grounds that slavery had to be stopped from spreading into these new lands.
Thomas Jefferson's famous quote here just says it all. He heard this debate and called it a fire bell in the night. He knew, instantly, that the fight over the West was no longer just about land. The economic engine of the Cotton Kingdom had slammed right into the nation's deepest moral and ideological conflict, slavery, and it threatened to burn the entire country down.
All right, so let's step back and try to land this plane. After looking at all of this, what's the final verdict on what drove expansion?
I think this table lays it out perfectly. On the one hand, you have the economic drivers, the pull of cheap land, the whole market revolution, the huge profits from crops like cotton, and all the new canals and railroads to make it happen. And on the other hand, you have the ideological drivers, Jefferson's dream, the politics of the common man, a horrific belief in racial superiority that justified Indian removal, and that powerful idea of the frontier as a place for a fresh start.
So, at the end of the day, the big takeaway here is that it was never an either-or situation. It was a feedback loop. The ambition for profit and land was the fuel in the engine, for sure. But the ideology, the ideas about liberty, democracy, and destiny, that was the justification. It was the moral license that let people feel that what they were doing was right. Each side made the other stronger.
And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on. This powerful American tradition of mixing economic ambition with high-minded principles didn't just stop in 1860. So the question for us is, how can we see that same dynamic, that same blend of profit and principle, shaping American debates and actions, both here at home and out in the world, today?